welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different kind of video. We are going to do some maintenance on a Traxxas TRX4M. This was suggested in a comment to me a little while back, and I thought it might be kind of a fun idea, and my TRX4M needs maintenance anyway, so why not? So if your TRX4M is looking kind of crusty, this might just be the video for you. Alright, so before we get started, you're going to want a few things. I've got some shock oil here. 20 weight works fine in the TRX4M. Some oil for the bushings or bearings if you have those. A little bit of grease for your gears. Some type of hex driver set or tools. This Dynamite one right here. Here, we'll flip it right. Works really well for the TRX4M. It's got all the sizes I want. I've got some green slime here. I use this when I rebuild shocks all the time. I've got this little brush that I use to clean nasty, dirty parts. And we'll want some paper towel and something to get the wheels off with if your hex driver doesn't have it. Lastly, you'll want somewhere to put like your screws and parts. I have this little drawer guy here that I'm going to use. So first we'll go ahead and get the body off, and we'll get the battery out, and we'll get the wheels and tires taken off. So body, batteries, and then for your wheels and tires you'll just use, I'm just going to use the 4-way that comes with the truck, honestly. Alright, so now that we got all the easy stuff off, it's time to go ahead and really start digging in on the truck here. How I usually do this, and this applies to pretty much every RC car that I have, I do it in chunks. So like one chunk is the front end, so the whole front axle, servo assembly, all of that's sort of one chunk. The next chunk is the middle here, so our transmission and all of that, it gets serviced then. And then the final chunk is the rear axle. I start with the front axle usually because it's not hard, but it requires a little more effort. So I like to start there so that I don't feel lazy on that part. Since this is a Traxxas TRX4M with all of the factory screws in it, we actually need two drivers. We need the 1.5 millimeter, and we're gonna need the 1/16. To start getting the front end off, usually I just start right here at the shocks. You can start by pulling these screws here. We'll get that out. And then up front here, we'll take this screw here out. We'll have to cut this zip tie right here. And then once we unplug the servo, the whole front end should actually just come right off. You might not need to do this, but if you remove the battery tray, it's a little bit easier to get these wires out. However, it is not required. You can just weasel them out one by one if you want. So I'll go ahead and get this done. And we should have a loose front axle. So now that our front axle is off, we can start the disassembly process. We have to take the servo off. It looks like you can take off the whole mount and everything, but it's really hard, so it's just easier to take the whole servo out and then take the mount off separate, take the steering link off, and then we'll also make sure to take these wheel hexes off and the pins. Don't lose those, put them somewhere safe because they're so easy to lose, and then it's just such a pain when you do. When you're done taking this part off, just go ahead and put the screw back in. That's what I always do, right back into the hole. That way I know for sure I'm not going to lose it. For the steering link, we'll take off this screw here and this screw here. It's pretty self-explanatory. Alright, so now we're just down to the axle here. So basically what we'll want to do is we'll want to do pretty much the same thing on both sides. Sometimes these are easy to get off, sometimes they're hard. So you might have to have a little pry tool, but there's the hex nut, and then there is the little pin right there. We got to pull him out. And then just set that to the side somewhere where it's not gonna get lost. That's what I have my little container for, because I have cats in here with me today and they like to knock things off the desk. And then you have these two screws here, top and bottom. With the knuckle here unscrewed, we can pull the whole drive shaft out, and then it comes out of here as well. And then that gives us access to these grimy looking bushings in here. So we're gonna clean and lube those first. Okay, so for this inner bushing here, we're just gonna carefully pry it out. Be careful, you don't wanna like stab your thumb or anything. And then for this inside bushing here that I hope to focus on, there we go. So for this inside bushing here, we just push it out. So with those out, we can go wash this thing off or whatever, but we're done with this piece for now. Now we're onto these. And I'm just gonna clean the grime off really fast, and then I'm gonna let them sit in some oil for a second and put them back where they go. Okay, so we've got our bushings here and we've cleaned them up. So now we're gonna go ahead and lube them. Just put them in like a little tray or something like that. You can add a couple drops of oil to that. I'm just using this 3-in-1. We can just let them sit in there for a minute. And that is the first part of this side. Now we're gonna take off the C-hub here. We're gonna get those bearings out, or bushings, and we're gonna put those in some oil as well. All right, there's the C-hub off, just 2 screws and just 1 bushing in there. You can see it here, but we need to just push it out from this side. You can see maybe just a little ridge there. Don't stab yourself. No problem. All right, so with this side fully taken apart, we are gonna wanna move on to the other side. So just repeat the exact same steps and don't put it back together yet because we'll have to knock out the diff before we can finish up on the axle. All right, so with the majority of the axle taken apart, now we can get into the diff. There are 4 screws on this side here where the drive shaft connects, and you'll need to remove the 4 of those to take off the diff cover. All right, off comes the diff cover, and it takes the gear with it on this one. Sometimes it'll stay in here, sometimes it won't, but you just have your main spool gear there, and then you've got a little spider gear in here. So we'll go ahead and take these bearings, or bushings in this case, off. We'll lube them up, clean it up, and we will reassemble everything the way we took it apart. All right, our diff is all reassembled. Now we're just gonna add a little bit of grease. You need to find a plastic safe grease. And anything made for RC will probably be fine, but like white lithium grease and stuff like that can cause issues. Anyway, adding a little grease is good because these come pretty dry and we don't even have bearings, so a little extra lube's not a bad idea. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to put together one side and then you're on your own for the other. It's basically the same way you took it apart. Here, let's see if I can get to focus. So we need to put our little bushing in here. Voila. Then just pop that guy right on there. And I think it's the same on either side. I've never had to pay that much attention, so I think we're the same on either side. We're gonna pop in our screws. And when you're screwing these down, guys, remember you're going into plastic. So once it's kind of tight, you're good. You don't have to, like, look, I'm gonna screw it in. And then just like that's it. All right, now it's time for the actual steering knuckle. Big bearing on the inside, bushing. I'm gonna keep doing that throughout this video, you guys, because I'm not used to working with bushings. Little one goes on the outside. And then these are marked left and right, but how I like to do it is if you look at it from the front, it goes towards the top, right? So like this. Drive shaft goes in, and you gotta make sure this little pin is perfect in here. See if I can get it out so you can see. You see that little pin? If it's sticking out a little, it won't seat all the way. So it's going to be perfect, and then it'll sit in nice and flush. Then you can just kind of plug it in. And if it doesn't want to go, just kind of twist a little bit and it'll eventually seat how it's supposed to. Put your screws back in, do the same thing on the other side, and that's it. All right, there's our axle put back together. I gotta be honest, it pained me to put these bushings back in versus just installing some bearings. But I just wanted to show how to do it on a bone stock truck. So later on, you can use this video to figure out how to change the bearings, or maybe I'll make another one where we just install bearings together. But all right, our front axle's done. Now the next logical step, since we're working on the front end, for me anyway, is gonna be the front shock absorbers, because they're already pretty much taken off. So all we gotta do is unscrew from the chassis and take them apart and start rebuilding. So that's where we're going next. Then we'll go to the transmission, and then we'll go to the rear end, which is just like the front end, but easier. Okay, so from this point, all we need to do to get the shocks off is remove that screw right there. I know that's probably super self-explanatory, but I wanted to be detailed. With the shock removed, the first steps to disassemble it are going to be to lift the spring up, and then on here, you should be able to find a little notch, like that right there. Pop that up, push it off, and let it go. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do with the shock is we're gonna take off the shock cap. Shouldn't be too bad. There we go. You can see we got a little shock bladder in there. We're just gonna leave that where it is. If you have any oil left in here, we're gonna pump it out. We'll have to bring my little tray back. I wish I had something better to hold it, but try to pump it out. Nothing in there. And now we gotta take off the shock bottom. Best way to do that. So I usually have, on here, I usually have some heat shrink tubing, but today we're gonna do the old cardboard method. So use some cardboard or something like that to protect. If you have shock pliers, you don't have to do this, but to protect the shaft, you can use some cardboard and then just unscrew that sucker. Okay, there's the shock bottom. Push this up and pull it out carefully. Voila. So now that we have that out, we'll want to go ahead and pop this off. These usually screw on a lot of other shocks, but in this case they just snap on. If you just work your way around it with your fingernail and just kind of work at it, it'll pop off, and then you'll be able to see the O-ring right there. We have the blue O-ring there, and then a little plastic bushing in the back. Another O-ring is also in there, so there's 3. How does it leak? It's like, seems like it's well built. We're gonna lube those up with some green slime and reinstall. Okay, so there's the first O-ring. It's got a little green slime on it. I have the little plastic bushing there. Also some green slime on it. And then our final bushing here with green slime on it goes in. And it's a nice slimy stack of bushings there. Hopefully that'll help with the leaking, but can't say for sure. These blue O-rings are actually really firm. I'm wondering if there's a chance that maybe replacing those with something of the same size, but like a better O-ring might be better. They just feel a lot more plasticky than shock O-rings that I'm used to. So I'm gonna try something, and I'm not sure that it's even a good idea, but if you look at the shock shaft, you can see it's not very smooth. So I'm gonna try to polish it with some metal polish. I'm gonna use this. A little bit of Cape Cod here. I've used this to polish up some scratches out of watches and stuff like that, and it's worked really well, and it's not too expensive, so I'm just gonna try it out, and we'll see how it goes. The method for polishing is gonna be pretty simple. We got the polishing cloth, we've got the shaft. I'm just gonna take it and keep working at it until it's super polished and smooth looking. This is not required. And if it does wind up being like some miraculous thing, then I'll let you guys know in the future. All right, so we are gonna start putting it back together. I got the shaft polished up. Once again, not sure that that's a good idea, but what is a good idea is to use lots of green slime or silicone or whatever it is that you're gonna use. So like silicone shock oil, by the way, not like caulk. That would be a terrible idea on all fronts. There is our shiny shock shaft now. I just polished it a little. I didn't get crazy, so hopefully it doesn't cause any issues, but I figured it'd be worth a try. Anyway, we're gonna wanna lube up these threads. Push it back through. We're gonna put the shock bottom on next, and that's pretty much the same way you take it off, so I'll do that off camera. Shock bottom's on. Gonna start filling it with some oil now. So some people go for just like a drop. I like to actually fill it just a little bit under full. Because we have to have room for the bladder. How I do this is I push the bottom all the way up. Screw the cap on. Okay. Then check it out. I mean, that's good. We're all set. Well, maybe not. So if you do have any resistance or any issues, you can loosen that shock cap up and you can pump the air through. Nice and easy. Sometimes it's good to just let it sit for a second. You can see the bubbles coming up. And I think we actually might need just a touch more shock oil. Yeah, you'll just keep working it like this until you get all the air bubbles out, and you'll know that you're done when you can put the cap on. And it won't push this out, and there won't be any issues there. Nice and buttery. Smooth, no weird resistance, no weird problems. And then you'll just reassemble it the same way you disassembled it. So, shock spring on. And then this fella right here, you'll just snap right back in where he goes. Boom. TRX4M shock. Nice and smooth.